Chapter 8. It hadn't quite been an invitation to teach him to read, but it was as close as she might ever get. Izzy had promised Lula she'd try to get through to Conrad, but she'd been unsure of just how. Now she knew. Wordsworth. Most of the words were simple. If she'd tried to get out a beginning primer, he'd have known her purpose and would have been embarrassed by her prodding. She avoided looking at him so he wouldn't see how she worried over each word. Poetry is a little different than usual books. It's more about conveying a feeling than it is about story, usually. Poets are highly skilled and pick just the perfect words with the exact meaning they're looking for. They don't always rhyme, but some do. This guy didn't rhyme. Conrad pointed to the book. She couldn't help but notice his glance flitting to the door, or his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He wanted to be anywhere but there with her. While Wordsworth was not all that difficult to understand, perhaps simpler poetry would be better, and a more lyrical poem might be easier to read. She stood and searched the shelf for a book that had been there the day before, one with simple lines and couplet form. "Why don't we plan to do this another day? It's getting a mite late, and I've got to be up with the sun tomorrow." Conrad stood, his bent shoulders reminding her of a boy caught being naughty. Would he ever believe that she didn't think less of him? That she was tired of the scholarly and wanted nothing to do with the man who put the love of learning and books above his love of her? Izzy went to meet him as he paused at the door. "I'm glad you came by. Thank you for returning my book. I'm so glad it wasn't ruined. But any time you want to borrow it, you may. I trust you." He gazed down into her eyes, so tall above her, yet she felt so protected near him. "Why, you have no reason to." But deep down she did. The man was honesty, safety, strength, and security, all in a rather appealing package. "But I do. I've seen what untrustworthy men look like. I know how they speak in sweet tones around others and turn viper as soon as a door closes. I know how they steal kisses and convince their prey they are good. You don't do that. You I trust." His head dipped just slightly, and his gaze flitted to her lips. "Don't put me on a pedestal. Any man worth his salt would try to steal a kiss from a pretty lady." His words released a stampede of feelings inside her that she was unprepared to handle. When she had first met Harland, his kiss had been nice, almost addicting, certainly exciting because it was forbidden. But after their wedding night, everything had changed. She'd still wanted him with the passion she had known nothing about, but he wanted nothing to do with her. She'd let him down, and if she wasn't careful, she could do that to Conrad, too. There was no cure for a loveless, passionless marriage, and she wouldn't do that to Conrad. "You haven't tried yet, and we've been alone twice. I'd say that means either you're trustworthy or—" His face hardened, and he shoved his hat on his head, hiding his eyes from her. "You're beautiful, and if you don't believe me, I'll show you." He stepped toward her. Izzy backed away. She hadn't thought for a moment he would disagree with her, but shouldn't she have expected it? Hadn't he aimed to prove how right he was just the day before in the pasture when he'd swept her right off her feet? He flinched at her reaction and shook his head as he turned for the door. "I don't want to hear any more nonsense. Next time you want to spout such hogwash, I won't threaten. I'll just prove you wrong." The door slammed shut, and she jumped at the sharp noise. She covered her lips with her fingers as she watched Conrad walk through the fading lamplight and into the darkness. Only a year and a half separated her from her first kiss, but her lips had only touched Harland's. Would Conrad be different? Would his lips bring that excitement? Or would she be so terrified of disappointing him that she wouldn't feel a thing? Izzy picked up the paper she had been writing on before he'd come in. She had been trying to remember her mother's recipe for sweet rolls. Something was missing, and the only way to figure it out was a day in the kitchen. Lula and Moretta would love to help her. At least it would keep her busy, and not thinking about kissing lips that were covered with a handsomely trimmed mustache.